Okay, hello everybody. Now we are going to be looking at Germany's defeat in World War II, the chapters 5.1. And you should have already listened to my lesson about the introduction, which is a timeline of what is happening in World War II. Okay, I'm trying a slightly different format today, so bear with me. Previously, remember we were talking about World War II and we know how the war started, so now we are looking at the end point. Of course, the question is what is the turning point? That is the classic 12-mark essay question, and this is what we are looking at today. We will be looking at this, the entry of the USA into World War II. And we are going to be finding out why this contributed to the end of the war. Okay, so this is what we are talking about. You should be following with me on your slides. Now, remember some key dates. 7th December 1941. This is the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, why is this important? Because it brought the USA into World War II. And what is the result of this? USA entered the war both in Asia and in Europe. Okay, World War II is going on in two sides of the planet, but the USA is involved in both. Okay, and though the trigger for the USA is Pearl Harbor, which is in the Pacific, okay, now the entry of the USA, of course, does affect what's happening in Europe. Okay, just a timeline. So now let me just draw a quick timeline. Okay, so here we have the war starting on 3rd September 1939. Somewhere in between, we have 7th December 1941, and now at the end of the war in Europe, we shall say April 1945. This is what is happening. It is not that the USA is not contributing, okay? From here on, the USA is a formal combatant. What does it mean? It means that they are so-called officially in the war. It means that they are sending troops to fight. But what is happening before this, it is not suddenly like on 7th December, then they finally, on 8th December when the USA said, okay, let's jump in, then they just went in without any preparation. No, before this, there was this period of what point one is going to talk about, indirect aid. Which is our first point, okay? So I just wanted to set the context that the entry of the USA into World War II, here we are talking about as a formal combatant, okay? So let's have a look at it. Now, the question is, of course, before 3rd September 1939, okay, the general US policy is one of isolationism, okay? Basically, you can think of it as shake leg. Sit there, shake leg. Okay, you don't disturb me, I don't disturb you. Essentially, they don't want to be involved in anything unless it affects them directly. Okay? This is why this position explains why they were not involved in World War II from the start, even though they were the most powerful nation on earth. Okay? So that will explain point 2. Okay? Just remember, you should read. If I'm going too fast, you should pause the video, read the slides, then listen to the explanation. Okay, I'm going to continue. So, the context is that the USA is a non-combatant. It's isolationist. It doesn't want to be involved. However, no man is an island. Similarly, no nation is an island, and countries such as Italy, Japan, Nazi Germany, they threaten America. Okay, so even though America does not want to go into war, they change their position into quarantining aggressor nations. That is to say, a quarantine, we are all familiar with it. You stay there and you don't move, right? What it means is that they would so-called place a cordon around the aggressor nation. Aggressor nation, those who are attacking first. Okay, this is a keyword. Please know what it means. Okay. And so they don't come into contact with them. Okay, that is their initial move. So what we see, this table shows what the Americans essentially start to do. Okay, why is we see that there's a trend of an increasing commitment of and involvement of resources. Why? It is because even though World War II begins, even though the Americans say that, oh no, I don't want to get involved into the war, they do recognize that Hitler is a threat, and that is why we have this point where American aid starts. Okay. Of course, later on, we already talked about that they moved into the war. Okay, so the trick here is direct military involvement. So we are going to look at two things. Okay, we have already covered this. We are going to look at this. Then we are going to look at this. Okay. So indirect aid, even though the USA is not a combatant nation, that means i.e. means that is to say no troops committed to the fight. Okay, they did send economic aid. Okay, basically they are sending troops, sending resources to Britain and France, the other allied countries. Okay, so the example is cash and carry. Okay, please read your textbook about this. Okay, so they started to sell weapons. When we say arms, not your literal arms, of course, we're talking about weapons. Okay, so why does this contribute to the end of the war? Very simple, because now Britain and France have somebody channeling resources to them. Okay, so on this slide, I'm just going to highlight the important facts that you can use. Okay, if you study this fact, you should know how to articulate this point. This thing is called the Lendlease Act. Okay, essentially what the Lendlease Act does, okay, is that the USA will just send weapons and resources, war resources, oil, coal, steel, so on and so forth, to the allied nations, even later the Soviet Union, okay, in 1941, okay. This is, of course, fun fact, this is one of the reasons why the USA became an economic superpower. I mean, an even bigger economic superpower after World War II, because everybody owed them money, okay. But my point is that the US aid contributed to helping the Allies stay afloat. Okay. So that is what is going on. Essentially, the point is that indirect aid provides the other allied powers with military resources. Okay. So this is what is going on. They are a provider of military resources. Okay. So what then happens after this? Okay, what happens is then now we have the trigger where Japan bombs Pearl Harbor, and now what we are going to see is that America enters the war. Now, America entering the war has two main effects. One of them is military consequences, and one of them is economic consequences. Okay, we are going to look at the economic consequence first. Okay, I will explain in due course. Now, the thing to note is that the USA is the world's most powerful industrial nation. What does this mean if I'm an industrial nation? It means I am capable of production. Production of what? Production of goods. Okay, and when I have a lot of factories, it means that I can make a lot of things. And this is tremendously important because the US can make everything. Okay, so these are pictures of the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor. There are many, many movies about it. Okay, now, this is key. Okay, if I am the most powerful nation in the world, okay, most powerful nation, powerful industrial nation, okay, I can say the strongest economy in the world, plus natural resources. What does it mean? It means that I can produce huge amounts of war material. Let me just give you an example. If I have a factory for making cars, it is very simple. Change of machinery, and I can build tanks. If I have a factory for spinning, creating clothes. Okay, very simple. I change the weave, I change the fabric, and I can produce uniforms. So already you can see how the US economy can shift. Okay, and the way to phrase it is that the economy shifted to a war footing, which means essentially that now the economy is focused on producing things necessary for war. Okay, there's a point here about the factories never being attacked by any Axis powers. Axis powers refers to Japan, Nazi Germany. Okay, why? Because America is protected by the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific and the Atlantic. Okay. What it means to say is that Axis bombers, Axis fighters will never be able to cross the sea in order to defeat them. Okay, that is what is going on. Okay, so that is what we're talking about. Point 2 is basically about manpower. Okay, so contribution of resources. Two things that are being contributed are troops and resources. Okay, so what this does is that it tilts the balance of power. Now, balance of power is a key phrase which you can use. Tilts, just imagine like a seesaw, right? Except now, because of the USA, this balance of power is shifted greatly. Okay, come vocabulary lesson. Irrevocable basically means it cannot be reversed. Irrevoked. Okay, you cannot revoke it. So far so good. Okay. Now, if you look at the second point after you have read it, okay, I'm going to point out one important thing. It says that the US was able to convert the wartime economy at a faster rate. Why is this important? Because if you think about it, everybody is on a wartime economy. However, because I can shift my economy so fast, I can make more than you can. Okay, war is essentially a competition of resources, right? Okay, so the second sentence here says that so just think about it. Every time you fire a bullet, you need a new bullet. Okay, but because the Americans had so much economic power, they can make more bullets than the Axis powers, which means they have more resources. They are winning the game of numbers. Okay. Here's some cool stuff. Propaganda posters. Not only our bad guys aren't the only people with propaganda posters. You can see these standard American propaganda posters. Okay, so one point that we want to make, okay, about the contribution of resources is that it shifted the scales, the tipped scales of the war in favor of the Allies. Okay. It provided, essentially what I'm trying to say is that provided the Allies with a logistical advantage. Here I use the word logistical because it is a term that summarizes everything, that it is both money, resources, okay, anything to do with providing more materials. Okay. So if you look at this slide, the analysis basically lays it out in how you can phrase it. Okay, so I want to say it cannot, the Axis, what I'm trying to say is that the Axis cannot beat the Allied powers, okay, in terms of raw amount of resources. Okay, so point 1, this is Allies and this is Axis, right? The category of comparison is amount of resources. And obviously the Allies are winning. Axis said. Now, not just amount of resources. If you can have a lot of resources, but if you can't do anything with them, or you can't move quickly enough to mobilize your resources, no use. So it is also the rate of production. Okay, how fast you can use your resources. The Allies also win. Why? Because the USA is the most powerful industrial nation on earth. Okay, so the key point here is that because of the economic strength, in the long run, the last point is here, the USA can win a long, sustained war because of the logistical advantage. You should be able to start picking up that there's a lot of keywords that I am mentioning. Okay, So now, I know this is a rather long video, but I'm just going to finish the last point. And the last point is military impact. We know, just now I said that when the USA formally entered the war, it didn't just bring the whole might of the American war machine, but there are some military advantages as well. Okay? Why? Because firstly, the US armed forces are enormous, and there are some things that they can do. The amount of force they can bring to bear is far more than whatever the Axis has. Okay. Crucially, there are also some key examples here in which you can show all these things show military superiority, the military advantages of the USA. Okay, the textbook gives quite a good overview of it, so make sure you go and read it. But essentially, I'll just explain each of them briefly. Now, control of the air, basically the term you want to use is air superiority. Air sup basically means that my air force controls the air, but yours can't. Why? Why is it the most important thing? Because an airplane is the most powerful thing on the battlefield. It can go further, faster, and is more accurate than anything else. Okay, and in war, speed wins. Whoever thinks faster, fights faster, is going to win. Okay, so the point being is that the US had air superiority. They dominated the air. That is why it's called control of the air. And what is the impact of this? Now that you know what is the control of the air, is that because they had this, they can bomb German industrial and military targets. Okay, why? Very simple. If I do not have air superiority, your fighter jets are going to shoot mine down. But now that I have air superiority, I can target you at will with impunity. Okay, impunity is spelled like this. Without fear of any retaliation. And when I target German industrial and military targets, okay, what does it mean? This is what will happen. Air offensive means the air attack. Okay, it hinders war. German war production means they cannot replace anything lah. Again, it is accentuating. Okay, accentuate is another word for making it even sharper, even clearer that this is going to be a disadvantage for the Germans and an advantage for the Americans. Okay, they also defeated the Luftwaffe. Okay, control of the sea, similar point. Most resources are transported by the sea over the Atlantic, which is the ocean between the USA and Europe. Okay, and the USA being in the middle, I mean, it's a separate continent. They have to transport things by sea, and that is why the control of the Atlantic Ocean was so important. If the Germans could control it, they would essentially cut off the American supply chain, which means that the Americans would be stranded, that over time, the Allies would lose the war. Okay? This is what I mean. This here is the Atlantic Ocean, and this is New York. This is the UK, right? So essentially, this is my supply chain. Okay, whoever maintains it has the logistical advantage. Okay. What you can say is that ultimately, here's the final point. Okay, the Allies would win the War of the Atlantic. So if I win Battle of Atlantic, sorry. It means that I maintain a logistical chain, which then creates a logistical advantage, which then allows allies to win. Okay, wars are won by just continually pushing whatever advantage you have. Okay. Finally, this is the, shall we say, the most stunning, okay, the strongest piece of evidence is Operation Overlord. 6 June 1944 is D-Day. D-Day, if you watch Saving Private Ryan, if you watch Band of Brothers, you will know this is the day in which they land, Sword, Juno, Omaha, okay. the Allies launch a huge counteroffensive to retake Germany. And this is huge because remember that Germany was the one who was like taking names, right? They had swept across Europe, and now comes the counter invasion, which is only possible only with American aid. Okay, it is American forces, American strategy that makes this possible. Okay, it is the accumulation of all the advantages the Allies have. Okay, this is what is going on in D-Day. The mulberries are a type of boat. Okay, and that is what's happening. This is France. This is the Channel, and this is the southern side of the UK. This is the south of England. What happens is an ID is an infantry division, but basically what would happen is that basically it is an invasion, and this is where the Americans would go, and this is the scene of all the movies that you see. Okay, on Normandy, which is the area from which they launched the counter invasion. Okay, and point being that this was the trigger for this marks very clearly the start of the Nazi defeat. Okay, they cannot hold their ground. The Americans are coming from this point. It is simply inevitable that the Allied forces will reach Berlin and reach Hitler as soon as possible. Okay, and so that will sum up the lesson for today. It is rather long, so do take your time to work through the content. Okay, so take your time and don't. Okay, I won't say don't kill yourself. No. You should stretch your mental stamina. Okay, see you all in class.